The sharp chime of the doorbell yanked me out of my focus on the book I'd been reading. My heart skipped a beat. Who could that be? I wasn't expecting anyone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked to the door, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped. How had she found me? It was Elena. I stood frozen, debating whether to ignore the ringing and pretend I wasn't home. But I knew Elena well enough to realize she wouldn't leave until she got what she came for. Reluctantly, I hooked the safety chain, opened the door just a crack, and asked, "What do you want, Elena? Didn't the way I left make it clear I never wanted to see you again?" Her face was a mix of desperation and confusion. "I don't even know why you left, Daniel. I came home, and you were just gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty closet where your things used to be." I scoffed. "You're joking, right? How could you not know? I told you exactly what would happen if you went through with your plan." She hesitated, then asked, "Can I come in?" I sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable. Might as well get it over with, I muttered, unhooking the chain and stepping aside. She walked in, glancing around as if she'd never been here before, and asked for a glass of water. As I headed to the kitchen, memories of the night that started it all came flooding back. It had been a typical evening until I came home from work to find Elena dressed to the nines. I didn't know we had plans to go out, I'd said, confused. "We don't," she replied, adjusting her earrings. "I have a date tonight." "A date? With who?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "You don't know him. Just a guy from work." "A guy from work? Does he know you're married?" I shot back, my voice rising. "That doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen between us. Besides, I didn't want to go to Vanessa's birthday party alone, and since you refused to go with me, I figured I'd go with him." "You know why I refused to go?" I said, trying to keep my anger in check. "I can't stand Vanessa, and I don't want you hanging around her either." Elena rolled her eyes. "Get used to it, Daniel. She's been my best friend since high school, and I'm not cutting her off just because you don't like her. I don't like her because she's been divorced 3 times, every time due to cheating. And I don't like going to her parties because of all the drugs around. So, because she cheated, you think I'm going to?" Elena snapped. "Honestly, look at how you're dressed for this friend from work. It's obvious you're dressing for him. And I can only think of one reason you'd do that." "That's a horrible thing to say," she shot back. "No, it's not. What did you wear to the last party at Vanessa's?" "Jeans and a sweater. But now you're in a little black dress, dressed to catch someone's eye. I know Vanessa's been trying to get you to join in her festivities for years. Seems like you finally decided to give it a try." "You're wrong. It's not like that," Elena insisted. "Easy enough to prove me wrong. Don't go. Stay here with me." "I can't. Ryan's counting on me." I took a deep breath. "All I can say, Elena, is that if you walk out that door, you're walking out on this marriage. You're being ridiculous. This won't hurt us at all," she said, turning to leave. "Goodbye, then," I said, my voice cold and final. She hesitated for a moment, as if sensing the weight of my words, but then she walked out. That night, I lay awake, wondering if I'd overreacted. I didn't think so. I knew what Vanessa's parties were like, and though Elena hadn't joined him before, she'd stayed late enough to know what went on. I'd heard Vanessa urging her on before. "Come on, Elena, your husband will never know." Elena would laugh it off, but sometimes her laughter felt a little too casual for my liking. I tried to talk Elena out of spending time with Vanessa for years, but their bond was hard to break. That night, as I lay in bed, divorce crossed my mind. But without proof of cheating, I wasn't sure. Could I live with her lack of regard for my feelings? We'd had 6 pretty great years together, but Vanessa had always been a constant thorn in our relationship. One might wonder why I didn't confront Elena sooner. The truth was, I wanted to know if she'd actually crossed the line. Confronting her might just push her to be sneakier about it, and I'd never know. But if she did it at Vanessa's, I had friends who'd tell me. So I went to bed, undecided. The ringing phone woke me. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was just past 1 a.m. My stomach clenched as I reached for the receiver. "Hello? Hey, idiot. Did I wake you up?" It was Vanessa. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tight. Just thought you should know. Your wife finally found herself a real man. What are you talking about? I demanded. Exactly what I said. Elena's finally with someone who knows what she needs. My heart sank as sounds of intimacy crackled through the line. And then I heard her voice. Yes, please. Harder. Clear as day. I slammed the phone down, but 30 seconds later, it rang again. I picked up the handset and dropped it onto the floor, unwilling to hear more. The only good thing about apartment living is the lack of clutter. Within an hour, I'd packed what I needed, loaded up my truck, and found a motel for the night. By morning, I was at the bank as soon as it opened, clearing out our joint accounts. Then I went to my job, told my boss I was quitting, and explained why. He understood, cut me my last check, and helped me load my tools. Since about 7 a.m., my phone had been buzzing nonstop with calls from Elena. I finally switched it off and decided to get a new number. Then I thought better of it. She might be able to find out. I tossed the phone in the trash and picked up a cheap prepaid one from a local store. Luckily, we didn't have joint credit cards, so I didn't need to worry about cutting off her access to my accounts. By 10 a.m., I was back on the road, driving somewhere. I hadn't figured out where yet, just that it had to be far from here. I settled in a new town miles away from Elena and found a job. The next 2 years passed quietly. I had a few dates here and there, and just as life was getting back to normal, Elena showed up at my door. How did you find me? I demanded. A very expensive private investigator, she replied. Why would you go to such lengths? Because you're my husband. I took the vow of for better or worse, and I meant it. Where did you get the money to pay a private investigator? I sold the house. What house? The one I was awarded in court. I started to ask about the court proceedings, but it didn't matter. Well, you wasted your money and your time. We're done. You did exactly what I said would end our marriage when you walked out to go to that party. Don't waste your breath trying to say nothing happened. Your friend Vanessa called me in the middle of the night and let me hear exactly what was going on. Your yes, please harder came through loud and clear. Elena stood in my living room, her face pale and her hands trembling. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Daniel, you have to let me explain, she pleaded, her voice cracking. It wasn't what you think. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. Oh, really? Because it sounded exactly like what I think. Vanessa made sure of that. She flinched at the mention of Vanessa's name. I didn't go to that party to cheat on you. It wasn't even on my mind. Maybe I overdressed, but Vanessa asked me to. She said Ryan would leave if he thought he wasn't going to get lucky, and for some reason, she didn't want him there. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Do you really expect me to believe that? Please just listen, she begged. Ryan got the wrong idea. He stuck to me like glue the entire night, barely letting me talk to anyone else. I danced with a few guys, but that was it. Just as the party was winding down, I started to feel dizzy and lightheaded. Vanessa suggested I'd had too much to drink and urged me to lie down in one of her spare bedrooms. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. Go on. Elena took a deep breath, her voice shaking. I'm not sure how or when it started, but slowly I became aware that someone was touching me. For a moment, I thought I was home in bed with you. But then I heard someone say, "Hurry it up, will you? I'm next." I looked around and saw Vanessa, Ryan, and a few other guys standing there watching. One of them was next in line. My stomach churned as she spoke, but I kept my expression neutral. And you expect me to believe you didn't know what was happening? Daniel, you know how I get when we're intimate. I lose myself, becoming nothing but a vessel of pleasure. I don't know how many men were with me before I passed out. I woke up the next morning next to Ryan. He was propped up on his elbow, looking at me. I saw the expression on his face and asked, "What happened?" He just smirked and said, "Never thought you'd cheat on Daniel. Glad you did, though. Hope to see more of you." I slapped him, got dressed, and headed to the hospital. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. The hospital? She nodded. I told the staff I thought I'd been given a date rape drug. They conducted tests and found traces of Rohypnol and ecstasy in my system. That's when they called the police. While I waited for them to arrive, I tried calling you, but I couldn't get through. I found out why when I got home and saw you were gone. I didn't say anything, my mind racing. Elena continued, her voice breaking. When the police questioned Ryan, he claimed he had no idea I was drugged. He said this was just what happened at Vanessa's parties and that I was well aware of it. He figured I'd finally decided to give it a try. The police thought Ryan must have played a part in what happened to me that night. When they pressured him, he turned on Vanessa, saying it was all her doing. She thought I really wanted to join in, so she decided to give me a little push. She figured that once the drugs wore off, I'd still be into it and want to do it again. Elena's tears were flowing freely now. She was right about one thing, I did enjoy it. But she neglected to remember that I had told her repeatedly I wouldn't join in without you. You had to be on board for me to participate. After leaving the hospital and the police station, I broke down and cried for 2 days. Then I hired an attorney and sued everyone who had been at that party. Most of the suits were dismissed because they all gave the same excuse Ryan had, but the cases against Vanessa and Ryan were valid because they had conspired against me. I won my lawsuits, but Vanessa had little to offer beyond her house. They asked if I would settle for that, and although she still owed $25,000 on it, I managed to pay it off with what I received from Ryan. Then I sold it and used the money to hire a private investigator to find you. I stared at her, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. You wasted your money and time on the PI for what? To get us back together? Elena, I love you, but I can't just forget what happened. She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. Daniel, I didn't do it willingly. I was drugged. You have to believe me. I shook my head, my voice firm. It's not about what happened at Vanessa's, though I did expect it to happen, and I warned you it likely would. It's about the total disrespect you showed before you left for your date. Your remark, "Don't be ridiculous, Daniel. This won't hurt us at all." As you walked out that door to go on a date with another man destroyed any chance we had. Now, please leave. I need to get ready for dinner. Elena's face fell, but she didn't move. I'm not giving up on us, Daniel. I'll fight for you. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and an incredibly attractive blonde walked in, calling out, "I'm home, babe. What's for dinner?" Then she saw Elena and asked, "Who's this?" "This is Elena," I said, my voice calm. "You've heard me mention her a time or two." The blonde walked over, bent down, and hugged Elena. "Thank you for sending Daniel to me," she said with a smile. Then she turned to me and asked, "What are we having for dinner? I thought we'd go out." "I made reservations at Caba's." "Perfect. I'll change," she said before heading for the bedroom. She paused and looked back at Elena. "Nice to meet you, Elena. Maybe we can get together sometime and compare notes." Elena looked stunned as the blonde disappeared into the bedroom. I turned to her and said, "You need to go now, Elena. I have to change for dinner." "Does she know you're still married?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She does," I replied. "You need to let her know I'm going to fight for you, Daniel." I shook my head. "Get real, Elena. For you to fight for me, you need to spend time with me. And that isn't happening. Get a divorce and find another man. And when you do find him, don't pull the same stunt on him that you pulled on me." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she said, "Damn it, Daniel. Why can't you understand that I didn't cheat on you? I was drugged. So what? You had to be there to be drugged, and that's the point. I told you not to go. I told you that when you walked out that door, you were kissing our marriage goodbye. You ignored me. You left. Marriage over. It's as simple as that. Now, please leave. I have a dinner date to prepare for." Elena wiped her tears and said, "I'm not divorcing you, Daniel, and you need to inform your girlfriend of that. She's never going to marry you." I smirked. "She can't marry me. She's already married and in the same situation I'm in. Her husband won't give her a divorce, and she won't waste the money trying to get one." Elena's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly composed herself. "I'll go, but I'm not going far. I can't get you back long distance, so I'm moving here. I'm going to win you back." I shook my head. "No, you aren't, Elena. I've already said this several times, and you need to understand that I mean it. I do not want you. Now go." She was crying, but she left. As the door closed behind her, the blonde, Sophia, came into the room, looking radiant. "Why aren't you ready? Did you decide not to go?" "No, just took longer to get rid of her than I anticipated," I replied. "Is she gone for good?" Sophia asked. "Should be. I made it clear I wanted nothing to do with her." "That's good," Sophia said with a smile, "because I don't intend to let you slip away from me." I smiled back. "Give me 10 minutes, and I'll be ready to go." Sophia and I arrived at Cabas, a cozy Italian restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of the city. The dim lighting and soft jazz music created an intimate atmosphere, but my mind was still racing from Elena's unexpected visit. Sophia, however, seemed completely at ease, her hand resting lightly on my arm as we were led to our table. "So," she said, picking up the wine menu, "are you going to tell me what that was all about back there? Or should I just guess?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's complicated. Elena showed up out of nowhere. She's my ex-wife." Sophia raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. "Ex-wife, huh? And she's still chasing you? You must have left quite an impression." "It's not like that," I said quickly. "We've been separated for 2 years. She's just having a hard time letting go." Sophia leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "And why is that? Did you break her heart? Or did she break yours?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Sophia and I had been seeing each other for a few months, but we'd always kept things light. We both knew the other was married, and we'd agreed not to pry into each other's pasts. But now, with Elena showing up, it felt like the past was crashing into the present. "It's a long story," I said finally. "But the short version is she made a choice that ended our marriage. I walked away, and now she's trying to undo it." Sophia nodded thoughtfully, sipping her wine. "Sounds messy, but I get it. Sometimes people don't realize what they've lost until it's gone." I studied her face, trying to read her expression. "What about you? Your husband still refusing to sign the divorce papers?" She shrugged, her smile fading slightly. "Yeah, he's stubborn. Thinks if he holds out long enough, I'll come crawling back. But he's wrong. I'm done with that chapter of my life." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "We're quite the pair, aren't we? Two people stuck in limbo, waiting for our exes to let us go." Sophia squeezed my hand, her smile returning. "Maybe, but at least we have each other. And honestly, Daniel, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me." I chuckled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I think I can live with that." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, good food, and even better company. By the time we left the restaurant, I'd almost forgotten about Elena's visit. Almost. As we walked to the car, Sophia slipped her arm through mine. "So, what's the plan for tomorrow? Another romantic dinner? Or are we finally going to do something adventurous?" I grinned. "Adventurous, huh? What did you have in mind?" Before she could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, "I'm not giving up, Daniel. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." Asterisk. I frowned, quickly deleting the message and slipping the phone back into my pocket. Sophia noticed the change in my expression and tilted her head. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a wrong number." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she leaned in and kissed me softly. "Let's go home." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my doorbell ringing. Again, I groaned, rolling out of bed and grabbing a robe. Sophia stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent before burying her face in the pillow. "I'll get it," I said, though I wasn't sure she heard me. I opened the door, fully expecting to see Elena standing there. Instead, I was greeted by a delivery man holding a large bouquet of roses. "Daniel Carter?" he asked. "That's me. These are for you," he said, handing me the flowers. "Have a nice day." I closed the door and stared at the bouquet, my stomach sinking. There was a card tucked among the roses. I pulled it out and read the message. Asterisk, "I'm sorry for everything. Please give me a chance to make it right. Elena." "Who's sending you flowers?" Sophia's voice came from behind me, startling me. I turned to see her standing in the hallway, her arms crossed and a playful smirk on her face. "Elena," I admitted, handing her the card. Sophia read it and raised an eyebrow. "Wow, she's persistent. What are you going to do?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. Ignore her, I guess. I've already told her it's over." Sophia stepped closer, her expression softening. "Daniel, you don't have to handle this alone. If you need to talk to her, I get it. Just don't let her manipulate you." I nodded, pulling her into a hug. "Thanks, Sophia. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, resting her head on my chest. "You'd probably be drowning in roses by now." I laughed, the tension easing from my shoulders. "Probably." Later that day, as Sophia and I were lounging on the couch, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." "Daniel, it's me." Elena's voice came through the line, shaky but determined. "We need to talk. Please." I glanced at Sophia, who was watching me intently. "Elena, I've already told you. There's nothing left to say." "You're wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, Daniel. A huge mistake. But I'm not the same person I was back then. I've changed, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove it to you." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Elena, it's not about whether you've changed. It's about the fact that I've moved on. I'm with someone else now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, she said, "I see. Well, I guess that's that then." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. "I'm sorry, Elena. I really am. But this is how it has to be." She didn't respond. After a moment, the line went dead. I set the phone down and looked at Sophia, who was still watching me. "She's not going to give up, is she?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but I'm not going to let her pull me back. I made my choice, Sophia, and I choose you." Sophia smiled, leaning in to kiss me. "Good, because I choose you too." A week passed, and Elena's attempts to contact me grew more sporadic. The flowers stopped coming, and the texts became less frequent. I started to think she'd finally accepted that it was over. But then, one evening, as Sophia and I were preparing dinner, there was a knock at the door. I exchanged a glance with Sophia, who was chopping vegetables at the counter. "I'll get it," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. When I opened the door, Elena was standing there, her eyes red and puffy, as if she'd been crying. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than I remembered. "Daniel," she said softly, "can we talk? Just for a few minutes." I hesitated, glancing back at Sophia, who was watching us from the kitchen. She gave me a small nod, her expression unreadable. "Fine," I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. "But make it quick." Elena took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them in front of her. "I know you've moved on. I get that, but I need you to understand something. What happened that night, it wasn't my fault. I was drugged, Daniel. I didn't consent to any of it." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I know that, Elena, and I'm sorry for what happened to you. But that doesn't change the fact that you chose to go to that party. You chose to ignore my warnings. You chose to walk out that door, knowing how I felt about Vanessa and her crowd." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "I was stupid, Daniel. I was selfish. But I've spent the last 2 years trying to make up for it. I've gone to therapy. I've cut Vanessa out of my life completely. I've done everything I can to become a better person. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "Elena, I don't hate you. I never did. But forgiveness doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. Too much has happened. Too much has changed." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. And I'm not asking you to take me back. I need you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. And I need you to know that I still love you." I looked away, my chest tightening. "I'm not saying this to guilt you," she said quickly. "I just needed to say it. For me. And for you." Because you deserve to know that you were loved, Daniel. You still are. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to comfort her. But another part of me knew that doing so would only give her false hope. So I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air between us. Finally, she wiped her tears and took a step back. I'll go now. I needed you to hear that. Thank you for listening. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped and her head bowed. I watched her until she disappeared around the corner, then went back inside. Sophia was still in the kitchen, but she'd stopped chopping vegetables. She was leaning against the counter, her arms crossed and her expression thoughtful. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. Yeah, she just needed to say some things. Sophia studied me for a moment, then walked over and wrapped her arms around me. "You're a good man, Daniel, and you don't owe her anything. But if you need to talk about it, I'm here." I hugged her back, resting my chin on top of her head. "Thanks, Sophia. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, pulling back to look at me. "You'd probably be eating takeout every night." I laughed, the tension easing from my shoulders. "Probably." The next few days were quiet. Elena didn't call or text, and I started to think she'd finally let go. But then, one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Daniel Carter?" a man's voice asked when I answered. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Detective Harris with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about Elena Martinez." My heart skipped a beat. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," the detective said quickly. "But we need to ask you a few questions about an ongoing investigation. Would you be able to come down to the station?" I hesitated, glancing at the clock. Sure." "When?" "As soon as possible," he said. "We'll be here all afternoon." "Okay, I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and called Sophia, explaining the situation. She offered to come with me, but I told her I'd handle it on my own. I wasn't sure what this was about, but I had a sinking feeling it wasn't good. When I arrived at the police station, Detective Harris was waiting for me. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He led me to a small interview room and gestured for me to sit. "Thanks for coming in," he said, taking a seat across from me. "We're investigating Vanessa Taylor and Ryan Collins for their involvement in a series of assaults at parties over the past few years. Elena Martinez is one of the victims, and she mentioned you might have information that could help us." I frowned, leaning forward. "What kind of information?" "Elena told us about the night she was drugged at Vanessa's party. She said you were aware of what went on at those parties and that you warned her not to go. Is that true?" I nodded. "Yeah. I knew Vanessa's parties were questionable. I'd heard stories from friends who'd been there, but I didn't have any proof. That's why I warned Elena." The detective nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. "Did you ever witness anything illegal at those parties?" I shook my head. "No, I never went to any of them. I just heard rumors." "Okay," he said, closing his notebook. "That's all we need for now. If we have more questions, we'll be in touch." I stood feeling a mix of relief and unease. Is she going to be okay?" The detective gave me a sympathetic look. "She's been through a lot, but she's strong. She's cooperating with the investigation, and we're doing everything we can to make sure Vanessa and Ryan face justice." I nodded, though the words did little to ease my guilt. "Thanks, Detective." As I left the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed Elena in some way. Maybe if I'd been more forceful in my warnings, she wouldn't have gone to that party. Maybe if I'd stayed, I could have protected her. But as I got into my car, I realized that dwelling on the past wouldn't change anything. Elena had made her choices, and so had I. All I could do now was focus on the future, and on the woman who'd stood by me through it all. I pulled out my phone and called Sophia. "Hey," I said when she answered. "I'm on my way home. Let's order takeout tonight." She laughed. "Sounds perfect. I'll see you soon." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. The investigation into Vanessa and Ryan's activities gained traction, and the media picked up the story. It seemed like every day there was a new headline about the scandal, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Justice was finally being served, but it didn't erase the pain Elena had endured or the guilt I still carried. Sophia and I grew closer during that time. She was my rock, always there to listen when I needed to talk or to distract me when I needed a break from the chaos. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she turned to me and said, "You know, Daniel, you don't have to carry all of this on your own. You've done everything you can to support Elena and help with the investigation. It's okay to let go." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know. It's just hard. I keep thinking about what could have been different." Sophia took my hand, her expression soft but firm. "You can't change the past. All you can do is learn from it and move forward. And you've done that. You've built a new life, and you've made it clear to Elena that you're not going back. That's not nothing." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "You're right. I just wish it didn't feel so messy." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Life is messy, but that's what makes it beautiful. We just have to find the good in the chaos." A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Elena. My stomach churned as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Daniel, I know you've moved on, and I respect that. I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done, for listening to me, for supporting me, and for helping the police with their investigation. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful for it. Asterisk. I've decided to leave Seattle. I need a fresh start, somewhere I can rebuild my life and focus on healing. I don't know where I'll end up, but I know it's time for me to let go of the past. And of you, asterisk. I hope you find the happiness you deserve, Daniel. You've always had a good heart, and I know you'll make someone very happy. Take care of yourself. Asterisk. With love, Elena." I folded the letter and set it aside, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Elena was finally letting go, and so was I. It was time to close that chapter of my life for good. That weekend, Sophia and I decided to take a trip out of the city. We packed a picnic and drove to a nearby lake, where we spent the day hiking, swimming, and laughing. As the sun set, we sat on a blanket by the water, watching the colors reflect on the surface. "This was a good idea," I said, leaning back on my elbows. "I needed this." Sophia smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Me too. Sometimes you just need to get away from everything and remember what's important." I turned to look at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. "You're important to me, Sophia. More than you know." She met my gaze, her eyes soft. "You're important to me too, Daniel. And no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere." I smiled, leaning in to kiss her. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The past was behind me, and the future was full of possibilities. A few months later, the investigation into Vanessa and Ryan's activities came to a close. Both were convicted on multiple charges, and the judge handed down a harsh sentence. It was a small measure of justice, but it was enough to bring some closure to the victims, including Elena. I didn't hear from her again, but I hoped she was finding her way. As for me, I was finally ready to move forward. Sophia and I continued to build our life together, one day at a time. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the city lights, Sophia turned to me and said, "You know, Daniel, I think we're going to be okay." I smiled, taking her hand in mine. "I think so too." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it.